It is on the 6th of March 2024. My name is statehousekenya. Thank you very much for taking your time to be with us on this particular day. A day when a government audit is the talk of the day. A day when government services are getting questioned. Kenya is going through a doctor strike across the country. CS Health, Nyakumincha, is asking them to come to the negotiating table, saying that indeed there can be a solution to the queries they have raised. In fact, she's saying that they're in the process of looking into those issues, just a matter of time before they get to a solution. At times, we were also seeing a couple of questions that have been raised to Azimio coalition leader Raila Amolo Odinga on what the fate of the coalition is going to be if indeed he takes up that top seat as the AU Commission chair, a job that is expected to start in February if indeed the support that even the EAC presidents have promised him is going to be a reality. It's also a day when we're talking about women and a women representation, a day when internationally we're looking at the woman, a position in a matters of importance, at a time when Aga Khan University has released a report that shows that women are not covered as their male counterparts in media reports across the country that have taken the president to also come in and say, if indeed they are not covered as they should be, then government policies are facing a challenge because the voice of women is not represented in them. We look at that this morning on a deeper sense. After that, we take a break and look at the role of AI in business. Questions have been raised about whether indeed AI is going to see people get out of employment. But for us, let's just talk about the role of AI before we talk about the residual impact of its application in businesses and operations across the world. For now, we take a tiny breather. Once we come back, we take a look at the newspapers. As usual, the hashtag is the morning drift. Let's start with the Daily Nation. State travel ban that never was. The much advertised or talked about ban on government officials has been revealed by the auditor. Sorry, that's the control of budget, Dr. Magre Nyakango, that was never essentially a thing that came to reality. All the way from July to December 2023, the amount spent was 11.38 billion on state travel. And if you look at July 2020 to June 2021, they spent 14.23 billion. So you can actually see that indeed it is just within the margins of the previous government all the way to where we are. In fact, if you look at some months before the government came into power, that is the Kenya Kwanza government, the previous government was spending less than they are currently spending. Because if you look at July to September 2023, they spent 4.33 billion. But if you look at October to December 2022, that was 4.74 billion that was spent on state travel. You're going to read that story on page 7. More paying as new ID and passport fee take effect is going to cost you 1,000 shillings to essentially duplicate or replace your lost ID. And if you look at IDs that were not previously registered, you're going to pay 300 shillings. Identification reports are going to cost you 1,000 shillings as well, from 300 shillings. Birth and death certificates is going to cost you 1,000 now. To amend the birth certificate is going to cost you 200 shillings from 30 shillings. To get a certificate of death is going to cost you 200 shillings to get a certificate of birth. And you're going to read that story on page 6. Pay rise for 36,500 promoted teachers is a story that has been covered on page 10. And if we look at the continued story from the Control of Budget report, members of parliament increase on a budget by 2 billion shillings. That's on the back page. And there's a story here as drama as athletes forced to compete. Story has been covered on page 36. And we're going to read about crime stories on page 3 on the newspapers. That's exactly how it looks on the Daily Nation this morning. We cross over to the next story this morning. On the Standard, Raila faces tough queries from Azimio. Azimio principals Capet Odinga in a 10th summit meeting, where the coalition leader was hard-pressed to explain why he snapped the party bosses on his African Union Commission job bid and how he reached a sort of handshake with a RUTO to a point of earning government support. Story has been covered on page 6. You're going to read about dead economy when sweet cane ruled in Western. You're going to read that story on pages 16 and 17. There's also a story here on protest over nepotism and tribalism and government appointments. It's a day after the court dealt a blow to KRA over skewed job appointments. The head of civil service and contractors in the North briefed separately added their voices to disturbing trend on unfairness and regions. Story has been covered on page 5. There's a story here on ESC presidents to support one candidate for the AU job. But that's President RUTO was challenged the East African Legislative Assembly to help change the narrative of Africa from a poor continent ridden with conflict and disease to that of immense opportunities, as it reveals that the region will back one candidate for the AU Commission chair position. Story has been covered on page 7. The story here on regulations for Airbnb story has been covered on page 12, and multiple sources who attended the meeting explained how Raila Odinga essentially used the opportunity to quell members that have rocked the collision of his move to contest the AUC chair position without information, as an extension of the same story that has been covered here on page 6. All right, they're going to read the fate for Donald Trump as the U.S. Supreme Court clears way for Trump. Then that's on page 22. The affairs and he may not contest for the 2024 general elections. It looks as if it's becoming a bit easy for him to contest on that particular position. Then you're going to read the story here on the back page on Arsenal boss Arteta happy with Arsenal's new signings, and the new signings are essentially Havertz, Kiwior, and the likes of Fabio Vieira as well. Havertz has been quite instrumental in Arsenal's run of 6 unbeaten games in the EPL. Also Kiwior, who's been called into the left back position at a time when the likes of Tomiyasu, Zinchenko have been out injured at a time when Arsenal really needs them. All right. Here's the thing, Champions League is back. We're going to see a couple of matches that are essentially going to be played. Man City is playing Copenhagen at 11 p.m. and Real Madrid and Leipzig are going to face each other at 11 p.m. as well. As on your back page, let's then just slightly touch on the Business Daily. They're talking about how Kenya is planning to sell old rail as scrap triggers 286 billion shillings fight. You're going to read that story as a main story right here on the Business Daily, and also that story on how members of parliament have increased their own budget by 2 billion shillings in first changes. You're also going to find it on the Business Daily this morning. Now, majority of these stories have been covered on our website www.lookuptv.co.ke. Once you're there, a like and a comment is what we'll appreciate. We'll come back with our newsroom this morning. Welcome back. The Auditor General Office and Interior Permanent Secretary were grilled by the Parliamentary Special Funds Account Committee to explain discrepancies in the financial year report 2020-2021 and 2021-2022. The committee further questioned the two on the progress of the compensation of the post-election violence victims. Stanley Lugaria was in attendance and opens a bulletin this morning.
The Principal Secretary Interior and National Administration Raymond Omolo and the Auditor General's Office appeared before the National Assembly Special Funds Account Committee chaired by Migori MP Fatuma Zainab Mohammed on Tuesday to examine the Auditor General report on the Humanitarian Fund for the financial years 2020 to 2022.
Did you have a look at the bank statement that these monies came from to pay these beneficiaries before you cleared it?
The committee poked holes into the Nancy Gadhungu office of how he did not realize errors in the financial year's report in question of millions of shillings, amounting to over 272 million shillings, even after realizing that the committee in charge contract expired.
The composition and functions of the committee and secretariat, there was no evidence in form of minutes to indicate that the committee deliberated on the matters of the fund and directed its administration in the year under audit and provided for under the Act. Further, no evidence was provided of an active secretariat as provided for in the Enabling Act. Consequently, the adequacy and effectiveness of all otherwise of risk management and oversight over the fund could not be confirmed.
The PS has been asked by the committee to appear in the next 7 days to brief the committee on the progress of the compensation of 2007 post-election violence victims.
Somebody really suffered in 2007. And you come in an office even if you don't know what really happened, but you still see the gaps. You've been given authority. At least by now we should be talking of I did, and I'm stuck here.
As well as reconstitution of the committee in charge whose term was never renewed after its expiry in 2017.
Chair, the PS has already said within 7 days he'll give us a letter, the one he has written to the executive, whether to disband this fund or to continue.
So we request you that all the bank balances you've stated here on a black and white paper, kindly get them certified and attach them to the other documents we asked for in the 7 days period that you'll be providing other documents.
Thank you, Chair. Maybe just to draw your attention, I think because these are copies, it might not be very visible. But if you look at the certificate of bank balances, particularly from National Bank, we start with Annex 2. There are signatures in terms of the authorized signatories, but then there is a accompanying statement which is stamped and signed. But yes, we can provide additional information as you direct.
Yes, please.
Stanley Lugaria, Lookuptv, Nairobi.
Interior Cabinet Secretary Kithure Kindiki has called on security officers deployed to northeastern and upper coast regions to work closely with local communities in the war against terrorism and violent extremism. Speaking in Lagedra, Garissa County, and CS Kindiki acknowledged the success in the war against terror, lauding the adoption and use of intelligence in security operations as a contributing factor.
Interior is set to begin construction of new administrative units in Shantabag, Garissa County. The move, according to Interior Cabinet Secretary Kithure Kindiki, will not only bring services to the people but also curb terrorism and violent extremism in northern Kenya.
Vile nikiwa hapo niseme ya kwamba ile ombi ambalo limeombwa na mheshimiwa MCA wa hapa la kugazeti police station mpya, hata hiyo ombi nataka niseme ya kwamba serikali imekubali, na hii ni kumaanisha ya kwamba serikali hii inazingatia matakwa ya wananchi na inafanya kazi na viongozi waliochaguliwa, haijalishi walichaguliwa na chama gani, kwa sababu serikali ya Kenya ni serikali moja na ni serikali ya kila mwananchi.
Kindiki further added that police officers are in the front line as they have continuously registered crucial successes against terror threats through use of technology, modern equipment and intelligence-led kinetic operations.
Tunaomba wananchi kushirikiana na serikali, na kama mnavyojua katika sehemu hii yetu ya kaskazini mwa Kenya tumekuwa na tatizo la wale magaidi ambao wametuumiza hapo awali, lakini tumeweka mikakati ya kumaliza kabisa adui ambaye anatoka nchi jirani kuja kudhuru usalama wa nchi yetu ya Kenya. Na tuko na wale maofisa ambao tumetuma hapa ambao ni special forces.
The CS also noted that the government will continue to enhance the operational capabilities of all security agencies and train more special forces to ensure even greater outcome.
I am asking the special forces who are working in this area to work closely with communities so that we move from the old way of doing things where the public does not see the direct connection and relationship with the security agencies.
Mevin Getembe, Lookuptv.
Two people have died after a Cessna training aircraft collided mid-air with a passenger plane from a Safari Link carrying 44 passengers at Nairobi National Park. In a statement by Safari Link, the passenger plane had just taken off when it experienced a loud bang. The Azimio coalition has slapped the Kenya Kwanza administration for punishing Kenyans with high taxation. Speaking after an Azimio summit meeting in Nairobi, the leader said that the current taxes imposed are unreasonable and hurt the Kenyan economy.
We remain opposed to the 16% tax on petroleum products. We remain opposed to the housing tax and its colonial undertones that make it look like the infamous hard tax of the colonial era. We are deeply opposed to the high pay rates that Kenyan workers are being forced to endure. We remain opposed to the subjection of the retiree pensions to taxation. We also remain opposed deeply to the idea of subjecting farm produce to taxation. It is our position that forcing farmers to part with 5 shillings for every 100 shillings they make from their farm produce is unreasonable and cruel. We encourage our farmers to resist this tax with all their might. On NADICO, we have been adequately briefed on the progress, including a number of bills, and to be exact, 9 of them, that have been lined up for the implementation of the report. We express gratitude to Parliament for the adoption of the report that was a product of a bipartisan consensus and wide public participation. We retain the view that the report must be implemented as is. It is also our position that the processing of the NADICO report and the bills should be fast-tracked. Regrettably, we have also been informed of forces within KK, in and outside of Parliament, who are determined to undermine the report and the bills. We notify those forces that should any efforts to undermine or tamper with the report succeed, there will be very heavy price to pay.
East African presidents have agreed to support one candidate for the African Union Commission AUC chairmanship. President William Ruto revealed while opening the East African Legislative Assembly, saying that the community agreed to have one candidate. Let's take a look.
Odinga's bid for the African Union Commission chairmanship has received a boost after President William Ruto announced that the East African presidents have agreed to back Raila Odinga. President William Ruto spoke when he officially opened the East African Legislative Assembly special plenary at Parliament's chambers in Nairobi. The president said the decision was arrived at after intensive consultation.
As members of the summit in East Africa, as you're all aware, the chair of the AU is coming up next year, as the term of Musa Faki, our current chair, comes to an end. It is going to be the turn for East Africa to provide the chair of the Africa Union. We have sat down in the spirit of the East African community. We have consulted as heads of state from the East African community together, and we have agreed to sponsor one candidate as East Africans. As East Africans, because that is the strength of our community, that we can do things together and we can consult amongst one another. So
the announcement comes as Somalia has also formally begun lobbying for its former Foreign Affairs Minister Fawzia Yusuf Adam to take the position, bringing about a challenge to Odinga. The Assembly will be having its sittings in Nairobi, returning to Kenya after a 6-year hiatus. At the same time, the Azimio la Umoja One Kenya Alliance welcomed the Kenya Kwanza administration's efforts to support the former Prime Minister as he looks to lead the continent as AU Commission boss.
Takes the seat. To this end, we very much appreciate the support of our neighbors and those across the continent who have extended their support to Right Honorable Raila Odinga. We are also encouraged by the personal efforts made by our party leader to win the seat without relying entirely on the endorsement by the state. And we are committed to reach out to friends and fellow leaders out there in support of our leaders' bid. The meeting also strongly welcomed the efforts of our country, Kenya, to back Honorable Odinga. We agree this is not a partisan political issue, but a matter of national pride and image. We are united on this.
I'll be going to not just Rwanda, I'll be going to many other African countries. And just watch this piece. I need to talk to many leaders across the continent. Because you know that a candidate to be successful must get two-thirds physically, first round or second round. If you don't get two-thirds, then you're not elected. So I have to dialogue with virtually all leadership of the country.
Brian Mwai, Lookuptv, Nairobi.
So for those who know how we celebrate international days across the world, Friday, March, that is the 8th of 2024, is International Women's Day. It's a day that the world essentially collects and talks about the advances we've made in women's rights across the world, and is a time when countries also talk about even some of the provisions of the Constitution that are talking about giving women the space and the time that are needed to advance economies. So today here, we're going to just call it International Women's Week, and we want to look at a couple of issues around women inclusion, because you can't have an International Women's Week without essentially talking about women inclusion. We're going to look at exactly what we're getting it right locally, what we're getting it wrong, and some of the advances then that we've made, and what we need to really talk about in terms of policy framework and progressive conversations that are even going to make us realize some of the elusive figures that we've not seen as a country, the two-third rule in parliament. Once we come back, we table that conversation. I already do see a couple of our guests who walked into the studio. We're going to be joined by Elijah Kandie, who is a senior human rights officer, Kenyan National Commission of Human Rights. We do also expect Ruth Bolo, who is a board chair, Young Women Leaders. We're also going to be joined by one Nancy Mutugu, who is the chief executive officer, United Women Circle, as we advance that particular conversation. Once we come back right here back to the Morning Drift, the conversation is the Morning Drift. The hashtag is the Morning Drift as well once we come back.
Once again, tuko hapa Angel Center for Abandoned Kids, all because of you.
My name is Catherine Wanjiru. I am the admin, Angel Center for Abandoned Children. Our founder is Wamaitha Mwangi. We currently have 64 children, 32 going to school, and among those 32, 2 are special children, and we are left at the home with 32. Now the toddlers and the infants. To the RUTO Foundation, thank you so much for remembering us. Guys, we lack words. We lack words. Amazing. We don't know what to say. Thank you for remembering us. You made a promise and you have delivered. And may God bless you. To my fellow Kenyans, as usual, cheza loto, sio ndoto. Angel Center tumeshinda loto.
Every time you play Lotto, 25% goes to the RUTO Foundation, which supports our fellow Kenyans through various causes. Thank you for your help. Together, we are changing lives.
Mambo ni mawili, kufikisha, kumwaga na kurudi. Kulala ni mwaka mpya.
Bua muka we mse. Ni mbaya. Wewe kwani wani video dereva anaendesha gari vibaya, lazima tususe. Anaendesha gari na kwa simu the whole time hata angalia barabara. Iliyopita peke yake watu zaidi ya 3,000 walipoteza maisha yao barabarani kwa sababu ya tabia kama hizo. Hautatuangamiza tukiona.
Naomba msamaha, tutapeleka vizuri.
Si wameomba msamaha. Sasa twende tusafiri kwa mwendo wa aste.
Dere Smart hufikisha abiria salama. Ujumbe huu umeletwa kwako na NTSA kwa ushirikiano na European Union.
Are you an SME looking for a media partner? Look no more, as Lookuptv got you covered for all your visibility and marketing needs. We at Lookuptv understand your business needs and want to work with you on your marketing journey, giving you solutions that will take you to the next level. Call us today on 0707 572 358 or send an email to sales@lookuptv.co.ke and kickstart this amazing journey. Welcome to Lookuptv, your official SME media partner.
Save a Life is a non-profit organization that has taken the front line in transforming lives in the entire country. So far, we have transformed the life of over 100,000 people through our programs, which include medical support, youth empowerment, street family program, feeding program, and climate change. Join us today as we transform lives. As we always say, service to humanity is service to God. Save a life, transforming lives.
Hata wewe rafiki, amka kumekucha. Tunataka kuangazia safety, biashara inayohusiana na usalama kazini.
Watu wa pikipiki ni nyinyi tunaongelesha, tunawajali. Baridi, hata magoti haiwezi ingia baridi.
Haiwezi ingia, hii tunaita ni ile padded na iko na hiyo insulation ya kuzuia hiyo baridi kuingia ndani.
Be safe, be safe. Be safe from cold, be safe hata ukianguka.
Sasa hii ni ile iko na reflective strips. Na pia tuko na kama hii ile haina reflective strips. Hii inatumika kwa ile kazi ya indoor activities, mahali ya uhitaji hakuna oncoming vehicles ama traffic.
Hapa kazi tu.
Hapa kazi kweli.
Hapa kazi tu.
As the night falls, we come to life to bring you a comprehensive broadcast from the numerous events happening across our 47 counties.
When it breaks, it matters, and each story is important.
If it's Thursday, join me, Nancy Lima, and my able panelists as we break down the law jargons and analyze the Constitution in a way only you can understand.
The news cycle never stops, neither does time. We cover each and every sector and present to you factual and accurate occurrences. This is where facts win the day. Join me,
Nancy Lima,
Ian Keitani, Tuesday, every Wednesday,
Thursday,
as from 9 p.m. on the Insight, only on Lookuptv.
To start us off today is the 2017 Mazda CX-5. This car, as you all know, is a very common car in Kenya, and it came in the year 2016 because at that time people were importing vehicles from 2012 onwards, and that's the year that this car was first produced. The tailgate is automatic and it comes with 507 liters of boot space, which is a very huge space. You can put a couple of suitcases over here. And it has a dual climate control. That means that the passengers at the front will experience the AC as well as the passengers at the rear part.
Hao ni wanafunzi wamekuja kusoma maneno ya mushroom.
Hata ule special ni mwanafunzi.
Hata huyo. So ni poa when you're starting mushroom farming upate msee mwenye anakuguide this story.
Yes.
And that's why tuko hapa tumeoffer farm yetu wasi wanaweza come na walani. Mushroom imegrow kwa wild. It's been here before human beings. Na sahi mushroom ikaweza acha kugrow. Pia sisi tunaenda extinct. Yes. So unapata hii ni kama ita grow ikue half a kilo. In 2 days iko ready for harvesting. Haina kuinama, haina kulima, haina jua, haina nini.
Karum tu.
Mse mwenye ako stay at home mom anaangalia show yako anasema, "Hey, how do I make extra money?" This is the solution.
This is the solution.
Yes.
Are you an SME looking for a media partner? Look no more, as Lookuptv got you covered for all your visibility and marketing needs. We at Lookuptv understand your business needs and want to work with you on your marketing journey, giving you solutions that will take you to the next level. Call us today on 0707 572 358 or send an email to sales@lookuptv.co.ke and kickstart this amazing journey. Welcome to Lookuptv, your official SME media partner. University of Nairobi is a distinguished institution of higher learning dedicated to nurturing your intellectual curiosity and pushing the boundaries of knowledge. From state-of-the-art laboratories to modern libraries equipped with the latest resources, we provide you with the tools you need to succeed. Choose from a wide range of programs programs designed to prepare you for challenges of tomorrow's world. Whether in STEM, humanities, business, or the arts, our strong industry connections and career service support will help you translate your education into meaningful career opportunities upon graduation. Join a vibrant community of scholars from around the world, fostering cultural exchange, collaboration, and lifelong friendships. Book your space now for September intakes. Log in to https://www.uonbi.ac.ke for a wide range of courses to choose from. You can also contact +254 020 491 0000 or email us at pr@ounbi.ac.ke.
Hao ni wanafunzi wamekuja kusoma maneno ya mushroom.
Hata yule shosho ni mwanafunzi.
Hata huyo. So ni poa when you're starting mushroom farming upate msee mwenye anakuguide story.
Yes.
And that's why tuko hapa tumeoffer farm yetu wasi wanaweza come na walani. Mushroom imegrow kwa wild. It's been here before human beings. Na sahi mushroom ikaweza acha kugrow. Pia sisi tunaenda extinct. Yes. So unapata hii ni kama ita grow ikwe half a kilo. In 2 days iko ready for harvesting. Haina kuinama, haina kulima, haina jua, haina nini.
Karum tu.
Mse mwenye ako stay at home mom anaangalia show yako anasema, "Hey, how do I make extra money?" This is the solution.
This is the solution.
Yes.
The day is going to be Friday, March 8th. That's when we're going to celebrate International Women's Day. But then the entire of this week we have to build up to Friday. That's when now we're talking about International Women Week. It's a week when we look at issues pertaining or surrounding women conversations, and from very many aspects really when you talk about conversations of women. Now today we want to look at just one thing: women inclusion. Now let me open you up to a Kenyan perspective so that we get it into proper context. There's a number that we've spoken about in this country for something that is going to be 2 decades now. It's called the 2/3. In fact, you can't talk about the 2/3 now. You gotta call it the elusive 2/3, because even in the current administration, where the president has taken it up upon himself as a personal project in a parliament where he's got majority, we still do not know what is going to be the fate of this 2/3 conversation, which is essentially on women inclusion. Guess what? There's a report that has been tabled in parliament. The president appointed a committee as a focus group that essentially spoke about how we can include women in our leadership positions in this country. But then, not yet tabled, not yet discussed. So that essentially then means that we have to have conversations around women inclusion. Now, I got to show you a USAID report, and this one goes all the way back to 2020. Now, I got to read it to you so we get the numbers. That Kenya scored 81 out of 100 on the Women, Business and Law 2020 index ranks. That essentially we ranked 109 out of 153 countries in the Global Gender Gap Report. You can see that. That's really bad. 109 out of 153. Which essentially points out to significant inequalities between males and females, number one, in education attainment, health outcomes, representation in parliament, and participation in the labor market. The report continues to state that over the past decade, legislative policy reform has established a basis for gender equality across all sectors, but then they put a red mark on it. But the implementation has been slow to non-existent in this country. No wonder then we rank 109 out of 159 countries that were essentially surveyed in this USAID report. Good. That's where we are. So this morning we talk about everything then in terms of women inclusion. And at this particular point then, let me introduce to the conversation Ruth Bolo, who is the board chair, Young Women Leaders Connect. Ruth, how are you doing?
Fine, thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Happy to have you around. We also do have Elijah Kandie Rotok, who is a senior human rights officer at the Kenyan National Human Rights Commission. How are you doing, Elijah?
Good morning. How are you doing?
Fantastic. It's good to have you around. Let's start like this, Ruth, and I'm going to start with you for the sake of this conversation as well. You know what? This USAID report that says that Kenya has made heavy advancements in terms of policy and reports and legislative policy on what we can do to include women in our matters here as a country. But then they keep on saying, but the implementation is what has been none too slow. That we do have law, we do have policy, but the implementation has been slow. Why? Why is that? Why is that existing?
Actually, we do have some of the best laws and policies in the continent.
Yes.
And I dare say in the world, because we have quite a lot of countries that come to Kenya to benchmark on some of our policies and just go through some of the various articles within our constitution. So in terms of policies, we have one of the best. We are covered, sealed tight. It's locked. But when it comes to the implementation, there's a big question of budget and finances. The Truth Agenda rule, for example, you have always, anytime that conversation comes up and we're looking for a formula, the first question always is, how much is it going to cost taxpayers? Or we are only adding positions for flower girls that are going to increase money for taxpayers, which is not the case. Look at the money that is lost in foreign travels and corruption and all these other things. So there's always the question of finances which is used. But two, I think we still just have not gotten the goodwill in terms of implementation. Aside from, before I come back to the Truth Agenda rule, I want you to look at something as basic as changing rooms or changing dockets for breastfeeding mothers. How many malls have provision for that? Very, very few. I can tell you about only 3 out of the very many malls in Nairobi have got that provision.
Yes.
So it goes to show you that it's just something as small as that. Go to our offices. How many of them have got a provision again for, a breastfeeding mother who has gone back to work? How many of them we introduced the paternal, period whereby then you're able to go and stay with your newborn child. But what happens is the women are saying no, remove it, because this man who is supposed to be at home with me and the baby is out gallivanting. He is using it as his leave. So I think it goes back down to, one, a societal conversation. And two, it also goes back down to the goodwill. And even before we look at the national government, it has to start with us, in our offices, in our malls, in our business premises, in our day-to-day conversations, in our public transportation. These are some of the conversations that we need to start from there, so that by the time the national government is coming and the National Assembly is coming to have a conversation of why do we need to increase the number of women, for example, then they have seen that from the bottom coming all the way up, it's a conversation that has already been picked and it's going. And Simba, I dare challenge us that in the next few years, it will be the men who are saying, guys, we need to be included. Because
guess what? It's already started as well, isn't it? And that's part of what we're going to talk about this morning as well.
Yes.
In terms of why the implementation is hitting the wall. Yes.
Because if you look at CBC,
yes,
most of our prefects, most of our, most of the people who are in drama festivals, what are the girls? Now, come to the next step. Now, these same girls who from their kindergarten level have the ones who have been given these leadership roles, they will continue the leadership roles, then at the point of now joining national politics, you're telling them for one reason or the other, there is a hindrance. So I think it's a conversation that we need to have in terms of goodwill, and it needs to start from the society. For the National Assembly, because the Senate is properly constituted, but it is National Assembly that is not properly constituted. In fact, it is very easy for someone to challenge because there is a live order that it needs to be disbanded from the former president, and it didn't happen. So if anyone actually goes to court to challenge and say, but this National Assembly is supposed to have been disbanded, it has not been disbanded, and it's going ahead to pass certain laws, then the courts ought to listen to that person, because how is an illegally constituted National Assembly passing laws for us as a country? I think we have a constitutional crisis there. The issue, though, with the formula, as has always been said year in, year out, I think is a very nitty-gritty issue that if each and every person puts their head together, they're able to come up with a solution.
Pretty much. Ruth, we're going to come and look at the specifics. You've started a conversation that is essentially a deeper outlook of even why a majority of these policies have not been implemented. Funny enough, Ruth, that even when it comes to the two-third gender rule in Parliament, you'll be surprised as some women are opposed to it, even with the working group that was appointed by the president. I will be pointing you out to that as well. Elijah, let me come to you. I'm going to start this conversation from a human rights perspective. At what point do we talk about women inclusion from a rights perspective?
Thank you very much. My take on this matter is that gender equality is a human rights concern, and it is a human rights issue.
Yes.
In that, for any country globally, both men and women, I would include intersex persons there, all have an equal opportunity before the law. And therefore, even in terms of the rights that accrue to each and every individual, you have to be treated in a manner that secures your dignity, that it's non-discriminatory, and therefore, when you leave out a section of our society, and for Kenya's case, half of the society, if you leave it out, then you are speaking to one aspect of it. There is an important contribution that women place and make in society. When you look at from the family unit,
yes,
34% of Kenyan households are headed by women. This is according to the KNBS KDHS survey that was conducted in 2022. And from this, you see that there is an importance of placing the role of the woman right from the family unit up to the point of where decision making are. One of the strong challenges that we do have pervading within our society is that despite us having good progressive laws that govern our current situation, we have good aspirations embedded in our constitution, but in terms of the implementation, you'd now come to issues relating to what has been our societal attitudes towards the role of the woman vis-a-vis the role of the man.
Yes.
What has also been the culture and the religious implications in terms of what a man plays and what a woman does. So when you see how our society is meshed, you would find that more women are taking roles that are caregiving in nature that sustain families, as opposed to going out there to fend for the family. And the need for our society to start providing opportunities for women means that even in our planning, in our drafting of budgets, in our implementations, we have to be gender responsive in the sense that we should be specific and targeting, trying to address the inequalities between men and women, so that whenever a county government or whenever any government agency is preparing its budget, what allocation towards it has been put towards gender mainstreaming, for instance.
Yes.
How many organizations, both private and public, have had conversations within themselves in terms of what is the relationship between their women and male employees that are within the society. So until these conversations are held, gender will still remain that woman issue. And because most men are still occupying these positions in spaces, they will say, they will put it as within the back burners and say this is a non-issue to us at the moment and it will never be prioritized. It is until you put a woman in such positions, those are the people who are supposed to speak out and say, wait a minute, let us put in some measures towards now inclusivity and ensuring that we have a fair representation of our society that reflects not only our ethnic and cultural perspectives, but also our gender dynamics that happen within the society.
Ruth, I'm going to come to you now on this particular conversation for inclusion. And there's so many ways that you look at it. We're going to look at cultural issues. Now, we do know in this country we're making advancements that now women can actually inherit property, which is a very good advance. But even before we come there, this is where it becomes a bitter issue, Ruth. And I'm going to put it as blunt as it is. That we are achieving or close to achieving parity in areas like education, which essentially then onboards these women and these men to these positions in these various companies. But here we are talking about inclusion when you're saying, well, when it comes to education, and even when you look at the number of girls and boys that we are graduating, maybe from primary schools and universities, you would say that we're close to 50-50 now, or close to making it very close in terms of the percentages. And here you are telling these men who know very well that we are 10 boys and 10 girls going for that position, but you're getting told, now, because of inclusion, we know that you're qualified, but we can't give you that position based on you are a man, and this position essentially is going to be left out for a lady in that position. Is that where it becomes a bit bitter? What is it that we need to understand when it comes to equality? Do we have a different definition of equality?
I think first I'd like to make it very clear that I don't push for equality, I push for equity for women. Basically because, one, women get criticized a lot harder. Look at it when it comes to education. Look at a boy who's gotten 350 in KCP and a girl who's gotten 350 in KCP. The girl is going to be told, okay, well, you've tried. You could have done better, but you've tried. Because the perception is that it's going to be difficult for you to get into a school. And so I think as women have grown up, they've always had it in their minds that you've got to work twice or thrice as harder as the man. And if you listen to what Elijah was talking about, the business premises, you'll find that a girl is going to be told, we are all sitting in a room, it's a board meeting, but the girl is going to be told, stand up and go and put for people tea. And we are all probably at the same level in terms of if it's a management level, if it's a junior level, we're all the same level. But because you're a woman, stand up and go. So by the time you come, the meeting has advanced because they're also not going to sit and wait for you to finish serving people tea. So you've got to yield some extra time to catch up to what was discussed while you were serving tea. So when it comes to equality, I know for a very long time we've always looked at it as, you know, women being favored and the men then getting a difficult or a disadvantaged end of the bargain. But the men have always gotten, you know, a head start, so to say. Even if you look at the property issue, it is only just the other day that women were able to get it. It is actually the other day that women were actually recognized as human beings in this country. Whether it is property, whether it is, you know, the passport issue, that you don't no longer have to, you know, remain in a man's file. So it was either your father's file, it was either your husband's file, your brother. Now we are human beings. Now look at the situation like that, Simba. So women have always been, we've always had to operate with our hands tied at the back. And so, and that's why I said where we are going, because right now women are starting to have their doors opened and they are taking it with everything that they have. Look at the organizations now that are having women as CEOs. In some organizations, they say for this particular role, we would like a woman and she must be of this particular quality.
Is that what we might not be getting it right?
We might not.
That angle of saying, and we'll come back to you as well, because the same challenge is what we're going on in the National Assembly.
Yes.
Where even some women who are qualified for those positions that have got there by right of qualification don't feel okay turning around and saying a fellow woman who got there by just the basis of being a woman. Is that what we're getting it wrong? That the implementation, whether we have this legislative policy that says do this, do this, do this, but the approach is what we're getting wrong. That you can't carry these positions, Ruth, and give them to women. Can you make the playing ground level so that they are competitive for both men and women?
Simba, at the risk of sounding controversial, when it comes to National Assembly, when it comes to politics, I will say give those women those positions, whether they are qualified, whether they are prostitutes, whether they have not read. But let's get those numbers there. Once we have the numbers,
yes,
and then we will have a conversation on the quality of women that we are getting. Because right now, the excuse that has always been used, one, is we don't have women who are qualified, which is a lie. There are very many women out here who are qualified. Look at PhD classes, majority of them are women. If you look at most classes, majority are women. Previously, in engineering classes, we would get very few women, but right now, the number of women who are taking engineering classes has increased. So the issue of qualification is no longer an issue. The second issue that is always brought up is budgetary implications. They will tell you that, if we bring in more women, because right now in National Assembly, the number that is missing for us to attain the 2/3 is 53 women.
Does it?
And they're going to tell you for us to bring in 53 women, it's going to cost taxpayers a lot of money, which is not true. It's going to cost taxpayers 41 shillings per year. That is less than the loaf of bread that we eat almost daily. And so those two things are conversations that have always made, women not get those positions. They've always made women not be able to get into those spaces.
But you say if it's
and
very,
the terrain in politics,
it's very motive on a national landscape. Could you imagine if that is happening now in companies as well? Is it not the same picture?
It's not the same picture, and I'll tell you why. I know a lot of times we tend to compare the two, but they are very, very different. In business or in the corporate space,
yes,
though there is a lot of lobbying and there is a lot of politics as well in the corporate space, is not as fierce as that of the national politics. And why I say this is because quite often in the corporate space, I will come with my CV and I will ask Simba to lobby for me. I would say, these are my qualifications. Then Simba will tell me, no, add this, remove this,
yes,
And so in the boardroom, they will, use the CV that I have presented to push for me. Now, in politics, it doesn't work that way. Because one, like I said, there is an issue of finances when you are in politics. In corporate, you might not need it so much. And even if you do, it's to a very minimal effect. But when it comes to national politics, you need money to move. You need money to bring masses together. You're competing with someone. For example, in Kiambu in 2017, the most affordable or the cheapest campaign was of 30 million shillings. Now, if as a woman you have just stepped into this race, you are a first timer, so you've never been nominated, you've never been there, you've just come from the corporate space or whatever space, where are you going to get 30 million shillings from to run a campaign? Because it's like a bet, it's like betting. You might get the seat, you might not. So there's a finance issue in the politics.
Is that the same question that the men would ask as well?
I don't think so.
Is that first time men were going for these particular positions? I mean, when you throw the finance question to them, I mean, we've seen men rise as first timers and rise to these positions.
Yes, but it's not the same, Simba, because men have always had property. So you're competing with Elijah, who's always had property, and you've just been able to get property just the other day. It's not the same. And that's why women and youth are categorized as special interest groups, because the dynamic of a woman and a young person is almost the same. But you cannot compare the dynamic of Ruth and Elijah, for example, or Ruth and,
yes,
an older man, for example, because then, like I said, apart from just the property issue, there's a societal issue where for a very long time it was believed that women are not allowed to vie. Look at it in some of the pastoral areas. To date, if they have not, apart from the women rep positions and the nominated seats, some of them do not have even elected women. I can tell you in some of the counties, apart from the nominated seats and the women rep seats, they don't have any elected woman because they believe a woman is not supposed to be elected. So you're going against a financial issue because these same men that are saying you are not supposed to vie will come back and fundraise for their fellow man. We've got the issue so you're going against finances, you're going against the societal perception, and then there's the third issue of violence. Of course, if you've read most of the reports, and even the one that was done previously by KOMC, it will tell you that a lot of women candidates were prone to electoral violence. And it's if you talk to the opponents, they'll tell you, but there's an easier target. The woman is going to tell you, hey, I have small children. What are my parents going to think? What is my husband going to think? So the minute they see violence, they pull back. So they are more prone to violence. And they're going at this. I know the men also face violence, but it is not to the extent of what the women face. Yes. We've had women who've gone up to the stage to give a speech, and their dresses are lifted up. Yet these are the very same women who are told, if you're a woman and you're in politics and you're coming to speak to us, come in a dress, because in our society, women do not wear trousers. So where is the balance? So for women, you've got all these hurdles that you've got to jump over, all these loops you have to pass before you get there. So it really is not the same symbol. Like I said, yes, we are walking a journey with our hands tied back, yes, and our opponents have their hands free, their legs free, their minds free. So really, they have very few hindrances compared to a woman.
Pretty much. Elijah, we're treating a very emotive subject this morning because there's a confusion that we are faced with now. People say that you can't address women inclusion with policy, that you have to chart a cultural background issue. That you can lay all those frameworks that you have. You can go to court. You can even go up to parliament and have the court send them home, like we've seen in this country. But if you cannot change the cultural aspect of that, then you're essentially fighting and losing more. The right of women in inclusion, when does it infringe the right of men? Because here we are talking about, you got to give these positions to women. But then you're saying, if you take these girls to school, if you take these women to school, let all of them graduate on the same degree, take them to the same class, all right? If a woman is qualified, take them to an interview, all right? That's what we're used to, all right? Then go get given work. So if a man qualifies for any other company, they will say, well, we had a competitive bidding process, we interviewed them, but then we ended up with a man in this particular position because they were the most qualified for this. But then here you are telling these companies, now, you got to change it. Can you pick a woman for this position? What if they actually feel that out of the candidates that we had, same education, same background, he is the most qualified? Are we fighting a cultural fight to solve a legal issue? Is that where the clash is?
Thank you. And I want to state this without contradiction, that we must get it right.
From where? Elijah, from where?
Yes, we must get it right in this sense that for the society to appreciate the inclusion of women, you will not start it by just only, say, laying out the policies and the legislations and then expect that within an instant that the society will change.
Yes.
It is gradual. And the reason why today we are having women complain might also flip, and we have men complain in the future generations, if anything is to go by in terms of the affirmative action that is ongoing at the moment. And so our laws and aspirations were that because we want to attain parity, we want to attain as much as possible where we have some semblance of equality between men and women. What happens now is you have to input affirmative action measures for a certain group that has been discriminated against, that have been left behind for the longest period. That category, for the purposes of this discussion, is women. Now look at Article 27 of our Constitution, where it says that the Parliament will set up legislation to realize this. And then it introduces the element of the 2/3 gender principle, that in all elective and appointive positions, that for now, what we can contend with, or we can be contented with, is that no gender should be more than 2/3 of the other gender. And so the idea is to bring into some semblance of equality and to include those who've been left behind, so that they become part and parcel of either decision making in terms of even employment and all these other positions that happen. So to the political class, Article 177 realized this within the county assemblies. It's unfortunate that as we progress, that there are some county assemblies that haven't achieved that. So there's been some clawback. And the current proposal is that we need to lift those provisions of Articles 177, where you have a top-up for the number of women that were not elected, so that we achieve the gender parity. This is a proposal that has been floated through many technical working groups that have been established since the promulgation of our constitution. And until we have first political goodwill starting from the top, that we should have a legislature that places that framework in place. We will just be talking and we will not realize it. And for this to come, so that we deal with the religious, cultural perspectives and also societal attitudes towards how do we treat each other as a society between men and women. As long as we are looking each other as competitors, and then we look at issues, then automatically every individual would revert to their gender and say, we as men, we as women, we are demanding this. So then that debate becomes contentious, in the sense that the men and all those few women who've fought for those positions would now ask, why should we give you this seat because you did not fight like the rest of us? The idea is to level the playing field. That's why, as a commission, the Kenya National Commission is championing for the relooking at the Campaign Finance Act. One of the critical issues that affects our politics is the financing. Can we level the playing field so that a person from a marginalized community stands the same chance with any other person, irrespective of their gender, if they wish to be, to form either a political party or an association, or to seek an elective position. So if we are able to ensure that our laws and procedures provide that equal playing field, and that we do not allow those who have either economical wherewithal greater than the others to take advantage of the process and influence the outcome, then we can be able to reach towards that semblance of equality. As at now, there is a lot to be done, but I would say that there has been progress in some aspects, such as the political parties under the registrar, where political parties are now told you must send the zebra list, or the list that makes sure that your nomination list must attain the 2/3. But still you would find that in terms of the categorization of the list itself, it still brings a challenge, because it depends on the relationship that you have between yourself and the party or the leadership at that point. So if we look at some of our internal processes, then that can be able to solve this problem. To the corporate sector and also the informal sector, then it is important for all institutions to realize that you cannot work as a specific gender and make decisions for the entire population in terms of businesses. When you look at the informal sector and how resources are distributed within our country, more and more women are coming into the space, and they play a very critical role in terms of advancing the economic status of our country. But in the same breath, some of the roles that they do play in terms of nurturing, also sustaining the family, are not categorized in such a way that they would contribute, that can be viewed in terms of the GDP and the growth of our country. So when and other studies have indicated that when you ask women whether they would want to participate in formal employment, a majority, up to 70%, would say yes, they would actually want to engage in that.
Yes.
But because of there are other limiting barriers within the society that make it difficult for them to attain this, then it behoves upon us, upon the leadership of our country, to realize that these things have to be addressed. And if you leave it, then that parity, that disparity will still permeate, and you'll still have inequality between men and women. You'll still have an entire population that is left behind. And to us, our idea is that you need to level that playing field and do it in the right way, in the sense that at no point are you discriminating against the other person in a negative manner, so that you attain your idea of either parity. But through affirmative action, you can say that for a particular position, we would reserve it for either a particular agenda.
Yes.
There are proposals, for example, as at the moment under the NADOC committee, you would see that they are suggesting that for the Senate we have 2 representatives, a man and a woman, that will obtain parity. Then there are those who argue that for some there should be quotas, so that in a particular region, when you find that their men are mostly elected, then you reserve certain positions for women. But then this would now put this such a structure at loggerheads with the community, who have the right to choose the person that they do want. So with these are some of the nitty-gritties that the multi-sectoral working group on achieving the 2/3 gender principle are looking towards. But one of the ideas that we do have at the moment is now the lifting of 177 and passing it to reflect within the National Assembly. But also I would, even within that, in trying to attain the agenda parity, you would find that within the county assemblies at the moment, the membership to some of the critical committees that make decisions in terms of resource allocation and so on, I would leave out some of these members who are either brought in as a top-up. So if you're not member of, for example, the liaison committee, then you're left out. Or even in terms of accessing some benefits such as mileage allowance, or even accessing the county vehicles to enable you to move around and champion the interests either of your political party or the interests of the people that you represent. That still becomes as another challenge, because the nominated person would still be viewed as you're just here to fill in the numbers, and even in terms of voting, at times they are not allowed to vote in some of the critical issues. So you can see that even in the attitude towards these persons who've been nominated, their independence of mind at times can be brought to question, especially when they decide to take a decision that might not necessarily augur well with the position of their political party. Then they would face instant disciplinary or even be removed. So with such levels of attitudes, there's still a lot more to do in terms of still resensitizing the community and even the leadership to understand that, hey, the times have changed and we have to make our society as equal as possible, so that everyone feels that they are part and parcel of the society that governs them, and they can make decisions that help them to advance their rights.
Pretty much.
Can I just react on 3 things that he said?
Yes, even as you react, I want you to please hold on to them once we come from this tiny breather that we're going into, because I'm going to give you that time to fully react on it. And even as we come back, I'm going to put to you some of the questions that I was asked yesterday by, interestingly, men and women from this particular side. Now, this is one. Grace was saying, do you realize that every time we release reports in this country about performance, we celebrate girls' performance? One. Do you realize that every time we release reports of university admissions and graduations, we celebrate high numbers of girls. Then finally, I have this one from Michael this morning who's saying, now this is a proper one, who's saying, how is it that we can talk about inclusion from top bottom? Shouldn't we start from bottom?
Absolutely.
First, equality, equity, then inclusion. He asks, is that where we're getting it wrong? We go for a tiny breather. Once we come back, Ruth is just going to weigh in on those particular questions that you've put to her, that every time we have more girls graduating than boys in this country, we celebrate. Every time we have more admissions to university for girls and boys, we celebrate. And Michael was saying, why are we starting from top? Why can't we start from here as we go upwards as well? Also, the question that has also been asked is that our country is majorly informal. If we're talking about job inclusion, is that there's this feeling that we're talking about the 20% for women, that where there are opportunities down here, because our economy is way informal, we don't talk about it. And that's why you find majority of men are getting absorbed into these areas, but women, we are focusing on the 20%. We're going to companies, we're going to boards, as opposed to where are these jobs and are the women really equipped to get into these jobs? Once we come back right here on The Morning Drift, the hashtag is The Morning Drift. We are talking about women, inclusion in general, as we look forward to 8th of March, which is this Friday. We want to talk about International Women's Day once we come back.
The winner of the 32nd edition, representing also the EMC, Weldon Langat.
Every time you play Lotto, 25% goes to the Lotto Foundation, which supports our fellow Kenyans through various causes. Thank you for your help. Together, we are changing lives.
University of Nairobi is a distinguished institution of higher learning dedicated to nurturing your intellectual curiosity and pushing the boundaries of knowledge. From state-of-the-art laboratories to modern libraries equipped with the latest resources, we provide you with the tools you need to succeed. Choose from a wide range of programs designed to prepare you for challenges of tomorrow's world. Whether in STEM, humanities, business, or the arts, our strong industry connections and career service support will help you translate your education into meaningful career opportunities upon graduation. Join a vibrant community of scholars from around the world, fostering cultural exchange, collaboration, and lifelong friendships. Book your space now for September intakes. Log in to https://www.uonbi.ac.ke for a wide range of courses to choose from. You can also contact +254 020 491 0000 or email us at pr@ounbi.ac.ke.
Save a Life is a non-profit organization that has taken the front line in transforming lives in the entire country. So far, we have transformed life of over 100,000 people through our programs, which include medical support, youth empowerment, street family program, feeding program, and climate change. Join us today as we transform lives. As we always say, service to humanity is service to God. Save a life, transforming lives.
Chatting a conversation that you think you might have an entire idea to it, but this is a confused, intertwined conversation that even the National House has not figured. They didn't figure. They didn't figure in the House. If you look at the Senate, I'm giving you the numbers, only 3 elected women senators right there in that Senate, the rest of them nominated. But then when you look at even the 3, it's only 3 women who can currently vote in the Senate. The rest of them can debate, can move motions, but they can't vote on them. Something happens to county assemblies as well, that you can only debate on it. But when it comes to making that critical vote, it's impossible. So when you look at majority of the representation, then even in the Senate, it is men. So when it comes to meeting quorum about a woman issue, you know exactly how it goes. And that's the same thing that has fallen the National Assembly. There are major countless times, by the way, and I want to take you back to Mwai Kibaki's time, when we were talking about this 2/3 rule, there was no quorum in the National House. That once men decide to walk out, then it's quite possible for that not to happen. Now, let me also remind you of some of the bills that we've seen in the National House that passed even before they were debated upon. Do you remember the controversial bill about separation of property in a marriage? Do you remember? Now, let me tell you, it was passed within a record 1 hour. It currently states that when it comes to divorce in this country, you can go to court and say that it's proper for you to quantify what that woman has brought to you within that period that you are married. So it's not 50-50. It's not 50-50, by the way. It used to be 50-50. But the members of parliament, who are majority men, passed it within a record 1 hour. So you go to court, you sit with your lawyers and say, this is exactly what you brought into this institution. That's what you walk out with. Showing you just how the balancing shifts because of representation in that house. Anyway, Ruth, before we get there, because we're going to come and talk about that as well, even on why the laws cannot change to even have women senators vote, the nominated ones, as currently as it is. You wanted to react to what Elijah said, but even as you react to that, I want you to remember what Grace and Michael said. We'll be addressing it from legislation, as opposed from starting down here as we go up as well, and why we celebrate women getting these positions.
I think I'll start with the issue of the governor, the goodwill. He spoke about goodwill. Yes. And I'd like to applaud the former President Uhuru Kenyatta, because His Excellency Uhuru Kenyatta once, 2013, sat in a Council of Governors meeting and realized he was surrounded by men. And he vowed that he will do everything possible to ensure that he pushes women for the gubernatorial seat. 2017, we actually saw him go to campaign for the late Joyce Laboso. We saw him go to campaign for Charity Ngilu, even though they were not, in politically good terms by the time. So we saw him go to actually campaign for these women.
Some people will say he failed. It was advised to,
because he had that's as he was campaigning for them, we saw some women coming. So in 2013 we had no women in the gubernatorial seat. 2017 we had women. 2022 there are even more, and the conversation now is perhaps the seat of governor should be reserved for women. And because of the performance of G7, well. Yes. That conversation is coming up. So I think there is a lot of goodwill that just has not been tapped into. He spoke about the Finance Act. The Finance Act is one of the best things that could have happened to politics. But the very politicians that are abusing that act are the very same ones that we expect them to pass. They're not going to pass the Finance Act. They're not going to pass some of those amendments because it's going to hinder them during their campaigns. It's how are you going, and even in terms of tracking it, how are you going to track that this person has said they've used X amount of money as opposed to Y amount of money? How do you track it when most of what they use is cash? If you got the campaign, look at the handouts, it is cash. So how are you going to track that money? It's quite difficult to track and enforce that particular act. And finally, when it comes to political parties, this is where the problem is. This is where the problem starts, and this is where the problem will end. Number one, when we talk about ensuring that at least 2/3 of your list of candidates is not of the same gender, What happens is Jubilee Party is going to put, or UDA Party, for example, will put a woman to vie for candidate in Homa Bay County. What are the odds of that woman getting, just based on the political party that they're using, what are the odds of that woman getting that seat? But when you look at the list, you'll say you've complied. ODM is going to take that woman to vie in Sugoi, for example. What are the odds of them getting that seat? But they will say we have complied. So on paper, they have complied. But when you actually look at the nitty-gritties and the odds and the kind of support, they will not even support that woman because they will say, we know you're not going to get it. They actually tell them.
Yes.
So even if that woman has a chance, just the kind of support that they're getting. So when we talk about political parties, this is where it starts and this is where it ends. Look at the negotiated democracy, or rather what they were calling the consensus nomination in 2022, which most of the political parties did, except the UDA government. I'd like to applaud them for that. Most of the political parties were telling them, let us come to consensus. So consensus ideally should be Elijah and I speaking and agreeing this is how it would go. But consensus, as it was happening, was the political parties, party election board sitting down and telling you, you cannot get it. We've done our homework. We've spoken to the ground. They're saying you cannot get it, so we are giving Elijah the seat. That was the consensus done. So even if you go to the political parties dispute tribunal, how are you going to actually say that we did not do a consensus? While in that room, everyone else is for Elijah. You're the only one who was there. You do not have proof of any recorded conversations.
Yes.
So if you are to go to the tribunal, what are you going to say? So when it comes to political parties and that particular act, it is good on paper and it is very easy to say that on paper we have attained, we have complied. But when you look at the nitty-gritties, it is not happening. So we need to relook at that conversation and see how do we push these political parties. We've seen a lot of this women curtailed because when they introduced the law of party hopping, it is women that it hurt. Because what the women were doing is if they come to KANU and they realize, for example, that in KANU that ticket is about to be snatched away from me, they will move to ANC and get their ticket and win the election. But now with that new rule that was introduced in 2022 election, that sort of injured them. Because your party has denied you the party ticket right in front of your face, and you now cannot move to another political party unless you go to independent. And the dynamics of being independent after you have vied with a party is not so favorable. So I think in terms of those three, I'd like to just, those are my reactions. But there's an aspect that we're not looking at, and it's the negotiated democracy. Like I said, we have areas where women are not allowed to vie. They do not believe in women leadership. They believe that a woman is supposed to be seen and not heard.
Yes.
That the woman's place is in the kitchen. And so when it comes to negotiating and things, so this clan is going to take the gubernatorial position, and this clan the Senate, and this clan this, and this clan will get the women rep position. If we do not have conversations with the powers that be in those particular negotiated democracy setups, then we're also going to leave them behind in this conversation. We're going to leave them behind because they will continue to make the laws and pronunciations as has already been done. And that brings me to what Michael said. Michael has asked, are we getting it wrong by starting at the top? And that's why I said we need to start with us, right here at the bottom. Let's have conversations in our public transportation. Let's have conversations in our business premises. Let's have conversations in our malls. Let's have conversations in our markets. Let's start at the bottom with us coming all the way up.
Somebody asked, in this conversation for starting with us, Ruth, when you look at our demographics in this country, we see that women are more than men. And if you look at the last census report as well, that was indicated as well, that women are more than men in this country. And we've had women vie for top leadership positions in this country, and they terribly fail to match the might of their fellow men. I mean, if it's a cultural issue, then that's a proper indication that even the women themselves, when it comes to pushing for these positions, I mean, I'm not going to sit here and lie that I've not had women who are saying, no, I mean, let it be the way it is. Even in the National House itself, where they're supposed to champion for women's rights, they look at it and say, no, let it be the way it is. If it's a cultural issue, I mean, we could be getting completely wrong by going to Parliament to think that indeed, once then we go to Parliament, we fix it everywhere. Somebody says, you can fix it in Parliament. Fine. through your affirmative action, you can today. We've seen it fixed in the county assemblies. We've seen it fixed at the Senate. But then somebody said, you tell me, of all those women senators who were in the last parliament, how many of them came back to the Senate once they went back to the communities to vie now?
I'll tell you where the problem is, Simba. It's not as easy as APC. When you look at number one, it is a balance of both the societal issue and the legal backing. And I'll give an example. In 2022, I saw with my own eyes situation where women would go with their husbands to the voting booth. So you go through the process and you go to the voting booth, you stand aside, he does the voting for you. It happened. And as I was sharing this story, I got other people saying, hiya, even in my area it happened.
Yes.
Hiya, even in my area it happened. Which means in this era, we've got women who are not able to vote. So how will I vote for my female candidate if it is my husband who is doing it on my behalf? How am I going to do that? And that's why I emphasize, we need to, one, start by having the societal conversation. But two, here is where the legal backing comes in. Unless you have a special case, unless you're a person with disability, why are you going, unless you are unable to read, why are you going with someone who is not an agent or an IEBC attendant to the booth? Because we don't know if you've been held at ransom. We don't know if someone has, bribed you. We don't know if you're being blackmailed. Why are you going with someone at the voting booth? That's where the legal backing comes in. When we talk about the elective seats and the elected leaders, this is where the balance comes in. Number one, political parties have been told this is the direction to go. Yeah. And I will tell you, if you have intimate conversation with some of these some of the nominated leaders, let me say, elected not so much, but some of the nominated leaders, they will tell you, I got this position because I used to wake up and go to my party leader's house to serve tea at the time when we had gone to the Supreme Court. That is why I was given this position. Others will tell you, for me, during campaign, I used to wake up and go and mop the whole floor. So for them, it is not just enough to be qualified. It is not just enough to have your papers. You have to go a step further and almost break your back to get it. And so if that is what is happening in political parties, if in political parties women are going through sexual harassment and sexual corruption, and I choose to separate the two because in sexual corruption, you are not exactly being harassed, but it is almost like you have to offer it because you might not have the land to give out. You might not have the car to sell and get the money. So what do you offer? That's where sexual corruption comes in. Now, these women are going through that in those political parties. And that is where the legal backing comes in. If you ask most of the political parties, and this was asked some time back about their sexual harassment policy, very many of them don't have. And I know of certain political parties who will tell you, for us, we have a sexual harassment policy. But talk to the women there, they don't know what is in that policy. So who exactly drafted it? Who exactly passed it? Who exactly partook in that conversation? We've had others where they say, no, we know women are going through that, but even for us men, we go through the sexual harassment. So we are the ones who are going to draft it and we will send it to you. So if this is what is happening within political parties, then how are we expecting the women to get to those elective seats? How are we expecting the women to get to those seats? So that is where it starts. And that's why I'm saying it is a balance between the societal perception and the legal, or rather the legislative end of it. So it's a holistic change that needs to be done.
Pretty much.
We can't just focus on one area.
That's fine. And I'll be coming to you on that response of why, Elijah, maybe you may look into that. And I want to put it to you like this. That your right stops becoming a right when I feel like it's stepping on my right as well. Do you get it?
Yes.
But here we are saying, it's okay. As a man, you can apply for that job, but you're not going to get it if you find yourself in the same room with a woman who might be as qualified as you are. The chances are that slightly she's got an advantage. And we've seen those advertisements in newspapers for these top positions when companies say that women are highly encouraged to apply for these particular positions. I mean, it's my right to go for this government job or a company job that has been advertised in this economy. But then I'll lose it if I'm sitting right there with a woman who's qualified as I am, or slightly underqualified as I am. And I'm expected to understand, no, you can't get it because you're not a woman, currently as it is in this country. Number two as well, that there is a feeling that if you're going to have a wholesome conversation, then everybody has to be right within it. The men who are feeling currently as it is, the same question that Michael was asking this morning, is that every time we release KCP results, there is an entire nation celebrating. A woman is the one who's leading. Oh, this time around we have 6 women in the top 10. But every time, it's not men, it's a non-issue. Every time we have more admissions and we see females are more to these universities or these schools, we are celebrating. And men are questioning, what about us? Are we completely out of the conversation now? Which is the same thing we're talking about. The culture in itself, it's something that we see, something that we observe. It's something that we as a country observe. In Kenya, currently as it is, we are celebrating women's success and not mentioning men's success and challenges. So it's a culture. So once we take it back to these men, they'll be telling you, nah, that's where the problem is, isn't it?
Now, your concerns are very valid, and I want us to have an understanding first. Part of the reason why you see that sort of celebration, you see today that if I walk into an interview, I meet Ruth, we have the same qualities, and then I find out later that they picked Ruth over me, yet we were quite qualified at the same level, is because as a society, as we speak, our statistics are showing that women and girls are still at a disadvantaged position, holistically as a country. I'll give you a good example, is that currently, because of issues such as sanitary pads, a significant number of girls miss out on school on those specific days during their menstrual cycle. Then a significant number of girls, actually 15%, fall pregnant between the ages of 15 and 19. In that age category, 15% of all children within the country, according to the KNBS. And also the dropout is still quite high because of other issues such as female genital mutilation tied with child marriages. So these girls are already married off. So by the time the number, it has improved over the years, but for the longest time, the numbers that we've been churning out has always been boys are more than the girls. Hence, you would have seen their sort of affirmative action in terms of the credits that one would attain to go to university. It has always been either lesser slightly for the girls as opposed to the boys. And with that, hence, when you see girls have actually succeeded,
Elijah,
that is the celebration.
In that particular context,
yes.
If you're going to put somebody in the same class, same teacher, same environment, we're talking about those ones who are in class, and then you tell this man that girls have got a lesser grade than you, maybe by 1 point. We've seen that happen in this country. But then some men were saying, well, hold on. If you're talking about equality, you put us in the same environment. Give us the same tutoring. Why is it that this girl who's been given the same opportunity as I've been given is sort of getting told, but you've tried to get this
one. Opportunity.
I just want to point out that when you have when you have people absolutely outside of either decision making or they are been left out from attaining the same qualities. For instance, attaining a good grades or attending class or not dropping out. Then we are in a generation currently where affirmative action is the only solution.
Is the only solution.
Where
yes.
you have to level the playing field by lifting the one who is below to try and bring them up to par to the current system. Now with that
currently as it is, when we're talking about achieving some gains in some areas, that one of those areas that we as a country can say that, well, women are now included, it is education, Elijah.
Indeed.
That we made advancements in that when we are asking the question of, are women included in education in this country? We'll be told that right now that not taking your kid to school, either girl or a boy, is a criminal offense and you get arrested. That now we have them in school. All right?
Yes.
But then we fall back, Elijah, and say, no, treat them differently. Despite the opportunity that we give them to be in class. That girls now, for you to qualify to the next level, you don't need to attain the same grade that this man is God. Is that why we get this backlash now? Because there's that feeling of, well, but when it comes to some areas we made advancements. So why can't you let it go then? That we've carried them, we've made an advancement. They are here with us, Elijah. We're in class together, same environment, same teachers. We're all getting funded by the government to be here as well, in whatever form it might come. So, she's going to university with a C minus. C minus isn't going to take me to university.
Now, I want you to understand that even the situation as it is, warranted the investments of previous governments. I would want to mention, for example, the Moi administration that put out so many girls' schools. You've seen Moi girls. There are many in this country. That parity wouldn't have been attained.
But would you say
the fact that we are getting there, we are not there yet at 50-50, so that we can now bring that conversation and say, now we have to be equal. Because remember, again, even in the percentages, in terms of advancement, I would tell you that only 21% of our population attains post-secondary education. That means an entire the large majority of us will be within the informal sector. But even within those percentages, the women will still be at a lesser point, hence the necessitating the affirmative action. But should we attain that affirmative action, one of the aspirations of our constitution was that even the 2/3 should have a sunset clause. The idea was that roughly around after 2 decades later, when gender parity would have been realized, then these concerns where equality between men and women is realized, then we go back, we revert to equality now, so that when we get to an interview position and we see an advertisement, then if I feel that I've been unfairly treated, I would challenge the appointment or the recruitment process in a court of law. And possibly the court would side with me.
If you're going to take that route, and I'll keep on referring to the example, Elijah.
Yes.
That how long is it going to take for us to realize that it cannot really work? That down here, even with affirmative action, just like Ruth was saying, that people will sort of find ways to still go around it, in the sense that if you look at the current Senate, I mean, in the previous Senate, we had nominated women senators who were given a platform to see exactly how it's done, get introduced to their people. The people were told, this is the one who represents you, all right?
Yes.
So the imagination with that affirmative action was like, you see, some of them, all right, once they've been introduced to this, they will be with us, they will be in the media, they'll go back to their people and champion for whatever it is they're pushing for in the Senate. Their people are going to recognize that we have strong women leaders who can actually represent us. But you see, what's happening with that one in the Senate is that after every 5 years, we have different nominated women senators who keep on appearing over time. In 5 years, it's not going to happen. I mean, in 5 years, it's not going to help us realize that particular one. Is that not an indication that maybe even with affirmative action, we're sort of forcing it in an area where it's not needed, Elijah?
I would like to respond to that this way.
Yes.
That the right to vote belongs to everyone.
Does it?
As an individual, I will choose whoever I want.
Yeah.
Now, for purposes of equality, remember we want to attain that every person should be equal before the law, irrespective of your gender, how you look, how you dress, and cultural background.
Yes.
So for us to level the playing field, you need to look at the progress. I can tell you that there has been some improvement in terms of representation, even in the National Assembly, where there still hasn't been parity.
No, sir.
There has been, I think, about 8% increase.
Yes.
Over the years. So you can see that eventually, increasingly, that there's been some gains towards increasing the representation of women. Now you will have to go back to the society to now rationalize as to whether a particular candidate performed well or not, so that they are able to be elected back. But look at also the increase in number of governors. Look at the increase in number of also the MCAs.
Yes.
So you can see that society is beginning to appreciate that indeed our children, whether they are boys or girls, should be given an equal opportunity so that they are able to fend for themselves and for the future of our country.
Yes, pretty much. But Elijah, sorry, I want to go to Ruth just a little bit before I come back to you, because you mentioned a point that is essentially supposed to take us to the next stage of this conversation.
Yes.
You see, Ruth, in this particular conversation, there are women who've been excelling in these leadership positions. For the very first time, we have 7 women governors. And if you saw how the voting process went, counties like Nakuru County, they have a woman member of parliament, they have a woman senator, they have a woman,
girls.
It's Nakuru girls. That's what they're calling it. That they were elected to those positions on merit, not nomination. That indeed, should you present strong leaders to the public, guess what? They'll be picked. And that's an example. We have a governor like Kabira Mwangaza, who went on an independent ticket, and she rose and beat men in an area, by the way, that culturally has been known that women will never rise to leadership. People then ask the question, so why then are you telling the people that, hi, you need to now go in and elect women, when in reality, what we need to be talking about is propping or educating these women so they can have the same skill set as their fellow counterparts, and then say, well, since you do have the skill set now, go to your electorate so they can elect you.
Let me start, Simba, by something you asked Elijah.
Yes.
On the women in Senate not going back. And I'll respond by also asking you a question. Why are we using examples of why are we using examples of failures and not successes? How many of these women in National Assembly were nominated and have gone back? Millie Mabona went in through affirmative action. Rachel Chebesh, affirmative action. Mishimboko, affirmative action. Martha, the Gilgil MP, affirmative action. And these are women who have, and we could go on and on. These are women who have proven time and time again that this seat needs to be there.
Percentage.
Now, when we talk about Senate, I want us to look at one Honorable Renee Mayaka. It is her first time in Senate, but it's not her first time being nominated. So, for her, she has actually gone a step higher. She's moved from county assembly to Senate. Almost similar role, because Senate also oversights, just like county assembly. They oversight the county governments. So for her, she has used that opportunity to move a step higher. So I think we need to start looking at the successes and not the failures, because if that was the case, and Simba, that is just an example of why we need affirmative action. Because for the women, it's always, you see, we elected a woman, now see what has happened. But why aren't women voting for other women? But why is it that nobody asked, why didn't men vote for Kabogo? Is he not a man? But if Kabogo was a woman, then they would be asking, you see, women don't vote for for each other. So that is a clear example of how women get judged slightly more harshly. Not even slightly, but they get judged harshly in the society. And that's just one of the reasons why, just one of the various reasons why we really need to continue with affirmative action, because they have to work twice, thrice, 4 times as hard. Look at the women representative seat. We've got a seat that is an affirmative action seat. You expect them to perform. They're getting less funds. Their funds delay. And how does that also paint them in the society? So we are expecting these same women that we are not funding or we are not giving enough funds and on time to perform better than the member of parliament and then come back and go for the member of parliament seat and win. So are we sabotaging them or are we actually giving them an opportunity? And so that is why there is that's why I keep insisting it's a holistic change that needs to be done. Because a seat like that, there's some amendments that need to be done, some legislative amendments that need to be done.
Yes.
Why is a woman representative who is in charge? And I always like to use Nairobi as an example. Nairobi has got 17 constituencies. Now this one woman rep that has 17 constituencies and 85 wards is supposed to be given the same funds as a member of parliament who has one constituency and probably 8 wards. Really, is that fair even in terms of how we are going to judge them? And because both of them are in National Assembly, we are going to look and say that this member of National Assembly is performing better than this other female member of National Assembly, whereas the dynamics are not the same. So how then are we expecting them, how then are we expecting them to move mountains based on these huge blocks that we are putting their way? So it's like you're giving someone a reward, but you're not giving them entirely. So how do you expect the person, you're giving someone tools to go and dig a farm, but you're not giving them everything. So how are you expecting them to do your work? So I think that's some of the conversations we had, and I just really needed to react on that. But now, looking at the composition of Senate. Sorry, I've lost my track of thought.
The question was in areas and counties where they've just decided by themselves that they're going to elect women leadership. And then you're also going to tell these counties that, well, we want you to elect women leaders, but they've already done it. So there's something that is working in terms of if you level the playing field, then the electorate is going to pick.
Yes, Simba, when it comes to politics, nothing is black or white. There's a lot of blues and grays and yellows hidden in there. I want to give an example of some of the counties that would look at women, and I'll give Homa Bay as an example. They had the first, in between Phoebe Asio and Millie Mabona is 16 years, which is a very long time of not having a female representative. But that being said, after Millie Mabona came in and people saw what she did, what she was doing, what happened? They increased the number of women who then are representing them. So when women are given that opportunity and their neighboring constituencies are seeing this, or the neighboring electorates, then they have got the faith that they're saying, if these people elected a woman and it went well for them, then maybe we could try and go that direction. Now, when you're not giving them an opportunity, and I'll give an example of Homa Bay's neighbor, Siaya. Do you know how difficult it is to get, apart from the women representative seat, whereby men are also asking, in Kisii and Nyamira, there are men who are also saying, this is very unfair. Why is it that it is only women who are queuing up for the women representative seat? Even us, we need to be able to vie for the women representative seat. Now, in Siaya County, apart from the women representative seat and the nominated, I challenge anyone today to tell me how many elected women they have, even in county assembly. I don't even want to talk about the members of parliament they have. I'll talk about the county assembly. Because it's a patriarchal issue, it's a societal issue, where they still feel that we cannot elect. So how are you going to convince these people when they have no example?
That's it. In the sense of then, in the sense of then, if indeed we have examples, and by the way, Meru County is another one as well, which essentially has been dominated by men leadership. If we do know that that's what it is, then before affirmative action, why can't we go in the same way if this is a country issue, the same way we go in and educate people on voting even before we pass a constitution, before we come in with a referendum, why can't we go in and do mass education?
Civic education. It's
before we come in and say, well, we've educated them continuously now for the past 5 years because it's a cultural issue, and you don't fix culture by affirmative action, is that you're still going to keep on getting backlash.
Simba, it's not enough to just do civic education.
Yes.
They need to see examples. And that's why I'm saying, see, a county like Nakuru have seen an example. Susan Gihika was Senate. She just didn't crop out of nowhere. She was in the Senate. She was the senator of Nakuru County. And they saw that example and they said, if our senator is performing in this manner, why don't we add? But had she not been there, had they not have had an example, then they probably would not have elected as many women as they did. Had Martha not been given the affirmative action seat, they might not have elected her. They might not have elected more women. So it is by giving them the opportunity and giving them the example. And that's why this affirmative action seat is important. Because when they are not able to see, we've seen results in areas where they have been given these women in the affirmative action seats, and they have seen what these women are doing, and they are saying, so because these women are performing, we are now comfortable enough to have a conversation about electing them. But in areas where they do not have even one example, surely we are being unfair also with the candidates there by telling them your neighbors who have had examples are having increased women based on merit, and you who has not had an example, we are also expecting you to attain the same results.
Pretty much. Elijah, we have 5 minutes for this conversation. I want to pick your final sentiments on this particular conversation. Here's what is happening, and they say this. We have affirmative action now, which is sort of like a government agenda, the government for the day. Somebody says, look here, you continue addressing it from affirmative action. What if the next government comes in and says this is not an issue that we need to pick? Because currently as it is, President Dr. William RUTO has essentially picked this as a personal issue. He's even come up with a working group that has tabled a report at the National House, and the President is calling for deliberation from the members of the National House on how this can be adopted and quickly at that. That indeed, we keep on talking about this, that affirmative action would solve it, but affirmative action is sort of like the work for the current government. That we can come in with the next government and say, well, this one we don't recognize it. For us, we have a different way of approaching it.
Well, to answer that, I would say that thank God for the Constitution that has already set out the aspirations. So irrespective of which regime comes in, whether they want to support or may not want to, the aspirations of the people will bind them as long as they swear and that they will abide by the principles of the Constitution. Now, for this, we appreciate that the current regime has made strides to try and address this problem. I would also add there that in terms of Article 100, there is also another group of individuals, such as the youth in this country, persons with disabilities, the elder persons, who also need to have that fair representation. And at times, that conversation is also lost when we come up with the conversations around the two-thirds dominate. So the implementation of two-thirds and also Article 100, because you need to provide mechanisms for any person within the country, if there should be equality before the law, so that they have an equal opportunity for any aspirations that they do have. That is the aspiration that we have placed ourselves at the constitutional level. So even as we gear up towards commemorating the International Women's Day, we must not forget that it also behoves us as men to be engaged in this, because they are a representation of our mothers, our sisters, our aunts. And these are critical family members of ours that we need to commemorate and take stock of the progress in terms of how we are nurturing them. And so we want to acknowledge any father, any uncle who is supporting a child, who is supporting a wife as a husband, to ensure that they invest in women, because the theme of this year is to invest in women and accelerate progress. And in doing so, there is a call towards ending poverty, to providing opportunities for women so that they can aspire to now be more equal towards the men, because the idea is gender equality. And in those being a human rights concern, we are calling upon the public to consolidate their efforts towards now implementing this. This augurs well again to our country's aspirations outside the Vision 2030, the social pillar, where we want to empower all citizens so that they have equal opportunities to advance themselves. The same also towards the Sustainable Development Goals and even the bottom-up economic transformative agenda, where this government has committed itself towards women empowerment to ensure that they are at par. Because we cannot have half of the population drawn back. And if they are empowered, then we are a better society today. So to us, we, as the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights, we look towards gender parity. And we are in supportive of the ongoing processes, and we are looking towards a future where we'll have better representation and also better appointive positions for both men and women in society. Thank you very much.
Yes, Ruth, I'm going to give you 15 seconds. If you speak, I will not speak. What must happen for us to start realizing women inclusion as of today? What can we start doing as of now on a personal level?
I think on a personal level, we need to change our perception about women leadership. I think we need to have a different conversation about women inclusion, because I know we've got women in some rural areas, they call them matafari, the clay blocks that are used for building, who are the ones who actually make them. And they've got a circle where they put them from, they load them onto the truck, they offload them themselves. But sometimes they're not given the opportunity because it's not supposed to be a woman's work. So let's give women an opportunity in the various spheres that we are in. Let's allow them to lead, let's allow them to work. Let's be fair to, if you see a breastfeeding woman, let's be fair to them. So I think let's just change that particular perception.
Pretty much. So much needs to happen. But just like Elijah is saying, it's a good thing we have a constitution that's already figured it out. So whether they like it or not, it's got to happen. And we voted for it 13 years down the line, almost 14 years down the line. We're still talking about hiccups and implementation. Is it going to happen? The challenge is out. The action is on us. All right? We take a tiny breather right here. Once we come back, I'll be telling you exactly what AI, artificial intelligence, is doing in the businesses across the world and what you can do now to start getting counted in this conversation once we come back.
There is a biblical quotation that says, whoever gives to an orphan lends to God. Today was a great day for us. We have received and hosted a wonderful and great team from Tatua Tatu.
Thank you, Tatua number 3, for coming.